And gamers, trainers, Pokemon, welcome to another episode of Pokemon's Health. Pokemon meets Men's Health. I'm your host, Roy Flash Gordon, here with our guest today, Nick Moran. Nick, how you doing?
Good, Roy. How about you?
Not too bad, man. Chilling, excited to chat with you. Folks listening on Spotify, make sure you remember to follow the podcast. And if you're on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Give us a like as well and share with somebody who you think be down for the message, get something out of this whole thing. And if you are fairly distracted, playing around with different energy levels, experiencing anything else that maybe ADHD, like myself, you may be into the book that we're reading for Patreon Book Club. Again, that's ADHD 2.0. Just started that a couple weeks back from whenever this podcast drops. So still time for you to grab the book, hop on in, see my experiences as I go chapter to chapter, talk about how ADHD has affected me and stuff that I'm learning in the book. So if that sounds good to you, you'll find the link for that Patreon somewhere in the description. All that said, we're going to hop on into our chat with Nick. Nick, why don't you introduce yourself, let the folks know a little bit about you, how old you are, what you do for a living, where you're from, that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first and foremost, like Roy, thanks for having me. Like, I super love what you're doing and like really support the platform message. So I'm like thrilled to be here with like your all-star cast of like former guests. But yeah, hey, so I'm Nick. I'm Nick Moran. I'm a 26-year-old PR associate from Chicago right now. I used to be from the northwest suburbs of the Chicagoland area. Now I'm living in Chicago. And yeah, no, I do public relations for a living. I work for a small esports and gaming centric PR firm based out of LA. I work remote, and professionally, I work with a bunch of like large gaming and esports companies, so EA, ESL Faceit Group, and more. Uh, taking my passion for esports and making a living out of it.
I'm sure lots of folks would be interested in how you got into that line of work. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about it, that if that's cool?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll keep the ramble short, but through all of my life, especially in high school, going to college, all I wanted to do was be a journalist. Actually,
Mm.
I wrote for my high school paper, which is where I met my girlfriend, now fiance. I went to college for journalism and communication studies, and spent all 4 years in the student paper, two leading it. Uh, and while I had a really strong passion for journalism, like my core of my interest was in like culture, so music, video games, the arts.
Mm.
And unfortunately, the end of my college experience was peak COVID, which is not a good time to start covering concerts and live events and the
Yeah.
music and the arts. And also, it's just, it was a difficult time to be a journalist, candidly. And so I tried to do some freelance work, had like my stint in local news and the arts reporting. And eventually, like, I needed to settle down and find a full-time job. And I went to school in Michigan, and my fiance was still here in Chicago. So I took an opportunity to write for a healthcare outlet in Chicago. Moved back home, settled into my first full-time job. I'm like, I'm doing this adult thing pretty well. I'm like living with my fiance. This is all great. But the work itself, even though I'm still doing journalism, just wasn't fulfilling. It's kind of hard to like tell like one of your friends or family, like, oh man, I write about health insurance all day and get them like really jazzed about it.
Yeah.
And it's hard to be jazzed yourself sometimes about it too, you know? So
Totally.
I found an opportunity to do contract work with my current PR firm, and I was actually working full time. So I'd work 9 to 5, and then work like 6 to 8, almost every day, doing like freelance work. So press releases, messaging, all that fun stuff for all these cool clients. Just because like I found work that I was like passionate about again. Like I'm working in gaming and esports. I found an opportunity to take my skills as a writer and as a journalist and kind of turn them on their head and make a career in public relations. And after doing that as a contractor for a while, I joined as a specialist and moved up the ranks to now I'm in my I think my third year almost at JSA, which is
Nice.
like really really a blessing to like be in the line of work that I'm in and like again take that passion I have as like a gamer all of my life and be a professional nerd.
Dude, it's so cool, so cool. And I know uh, kind of career in video games is something a lot of us may have dreamed of back in the day. So it's super cool that you're getting to live that out. And speaking of back of the day, take us back to when Pokemon started for you. What was your first gen? How has the evolution of Pokemon in your life looked?
Oh man. Well, now it feels like I'm looking way back. But I remember actually like Pokemon's been like really formative to my like, experience like growing up as a gamer. I've been a gamer all my life.
Yeah.
I'm one of four kids. I grew up playing like split screen, Mario Kart Double Dash and like you playing on the N64. However, the first game I ever bought with my own money, like back in grade school, is I went to a GameStop and I bought a used copy of Pokemon Ruby. And that would
Yes.
like set me off, dude. Like that was it. Like from that moment I'm into the deep of this.
Hell
And
yeah.
it helps when you have like brothers and sisters that also have an association with gaming. Like I have memories like of our dad hunting down for used like Game Boy Advanced SP connector cables so we could trade Pokemon between Sapphire and
Mm.
Ruby.
Hell yeah.
uh Eventually you graduate to the DS and you get Platinum. I bought like a Game Shark back in the day and I thought that was so cool to be able to like hack in rare candies and stuff.
Yeah.
So like Pokemon has kind of like always been there for as long as I've been a gamer, or at least most of
Yeah.
my gaming career. I took a break during high school and college when I kind of like dove deeper into gaming and played more like adult competitive games like League of Legends and
Yeah.
Hearthstone and all that fun stuff. But when the Switch came out, I circled back to Pokemon Sword and Shield. I, was turned on to VGC and the competitive side of Pokemon too.
Mm.
And that kind of like re-kickstarted like nostalgia plus like a level of access that I now had because I kind of skipped the 3DS.
Yeah.
Like re-inspired that like modern love for Pokemon, and I'm right back now in the deep end of it again.
Hell yeah, dude. That's what's up. And I think we bumped into each other at a Chicago local, probably good games.
Yeah,
Uh
it was.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Dope, dope. Are you still getting out there? I haven't been in a bit, but have you been getting out there lately?
I haven't been recently because when life takes over, like
Yeah,
Pokemon competing takes a back seat. But
totally.
I have like a really core group of friends who are all in the VGC, and we run like in-house leagues on Discord through like
Hell yeah.
Showdown and stuff like that. So
Dope.
just because I'm not like in person at a local or a regional doesn't mean I'm not still like involved.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. How are you liking Reg G Part 2?
I am a huge fan. I'm a
Yeah.
Zambazenta believer till the end.
Nice.
At currently, like, because GC just started like an hour or so ago as of time of
Yeah.
recording. I'm actually like playing with the Tropius Sun team just for fun.
Nice.
So if
That's
you're
so
into
cool.
like the one Tropius probably on ladder, that's probably me.
Yo, dude, get it, get it. That's what's up. I'm glad you're having fun with it. I was definitely snoozing on the GC, and they were talking about it in Discord earlier, and I'm like, oh, that's today. I think I'll just have to slap this suboptimal Maridon team together,
Yep,
and we're
that's
just
where I'm
gonna
at
have fun,
too.
play some games. You know what I mean? Have a good time with it. I love that you started with Ruby. That is one of the generations where the starters I feel are equally as cool. And who is your favorite if you could pick one from that gen?
Man, okay, so back in the day, I was a big Trico guy. Now it's got
Mm,
to be Mudkip. I've kind of like come full circle.
got it.
Uh, and I think like the cool thing about like Gen 3 is it feels like it's kind of like, our generation's like Gen, right? Like
Yeah.
that, like if you're an old school Pokemon fan, like Gen
Mhm.
3 just feels like it hits home for most folks kind of
Totally.
our age.
Yes,
And
yes.
I think that like when you look at a lot of like content creation nowadays, right? Like, ROM hacks and like speed runs and stuff like that, like it's almost all Gen
Gen
3. And so
3,
I
you're
think
right.
that like it's a very special gen to kind of be onboarded into Pokemon with because you
Yes.
resonate with so many other people who have the same experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Super dope. I was Torchic all the way, and Trico is who I kind of gravitated towards
Hmm.
more in the future. I just think they're all so dope. It was super dope, and they all got mega evolutions as well. The
Hmm.
definitely much desired love. Love it, dude. Love it. Pokemon, what a journey and what a connector and a great thing to have these conversations over with just I keep running into guys who are just feel very emotionally intelligent, can have these conversations and have some really good takes on, being the type of man, the type of person they want to be without accepting too much pressure. And I wonder if there's something about Pokemon that's like, we're the guys who stuck with it or came back to it in our older ages and whatnot and unapologetically loving it. There's something about that that helps us just I don't know kind of turn away from the stuff that says, we're not allowed to enjoy a part of our humanity because we're a man, a quote unquote real man, wouldn't do that. And I'd
Hmm.
love to slide into this and kind of ask you your kind of thoughts on masculinity, your experience with it. What's manhood been like for you?
Yeah, well, like Roy, I want to touch on something that you brought up because I
Yeah.
think that like Pokemon's a really great like example of this, but do
Mhm.
think that this extends to the broader like gaming and esports community too. That
Yeah.
like I think that there's a level of passion that kind of bonds, especially men in the community.
Mhm.
But like I extend this kind of to the broader community that when you are into hobbies and interests like gaming that historically have been like you know uh deemed as like these kind of like nerdy, isolated, kind of
Mhm.
like reclusive hobbies you
Yeah.
don't often have I feel like growing up like it was hard to admit like I was a gamer, in some
Yeah.
cases. Like I found
Mhm.
friends in a network like early on like that was super supportive, but like if I were to bump into a stranger like growing up and they're like, "What do you do for fun?" I'd be like, "Oh, like I played baseball growing up," or like I enjoy music, right? But like I wouldn't like go down the gaming rabbit hole, right? But
Yeah.
I think that now, especially if that's changed, and a lot of that's changed is because like gamers and, through the lens of this conversation, like male gamers, like have taken a lot of ownership and pride over the community, right? Like
Yes.
gamer is no longer a label that you like keep kind of like in your back pocket. It's something you
Hmm.
can wear with pride. And I feel like, fortunately through work, I'm able to go to like live gaming events where I feel like these, online relationships like really come to life. And, even with you, like with VGC regionals, right? Like you're surrounded by hundreds of people who
Yes.
have like taken that label and rather than putting it in their back pocket, they wear it on their chest. And that kind
Yes.
of gives you this level of like, I think a lot of folks, and for this conversation, like men in particular, like can resonate with that shared experience. Like there was a point
Mhm.
in my, life where I probably like wouldn't have been proud or vocal about being a gamer, but like now it's a part of my identity, it's part of pop culture.
Mhm.
And I think with that is where like a lot of like the newfound confidence that I feel like a lot of others have in terms of like really diving in and embracing gaming. Like I plan to like raise a kid one day and like have them choose his starter Pokemon or like their starter Pokemon, right? Like, and
Yes.
that's something I'll like blast on social media. I'll share with my family, but like you know, it's there's a sense of pride and community that comes with it nowadays. And I think that when we're talking about like these shared experiences, like gaming is just really really powerful there. Uh,
Absolutely. I think the community piece of it, like how social media, for example, has done a lot to help us be like, oh, they like this, and all of a sudden, you're looking at the people who are following them, and it's all these a bunch of content creators or just other fans of the work, and you see this person has however many followers, and it's like, wow, these people really are down with this game, down with this experience, and it's not just me. Just how we're able to be connected through improved technology that lets us play games with people all over the place. Something like the GC can happen, and we're all celebrating it on whatever social media you're hanging out with other Pokemon folks on, and it is, yeah, just that connectivity, the fact that we can't have that community, no, it's not just us, is allows us to be like, yeah, we're gonna be loud about this so my people can find me. I want to find my
yeah.
people too, or we're gonna go out and make it happen, and find something that a lot of us might be seeking, and it is additional connection a lot of the time. So super dope, bro.
Yeah, and like Roy, like I mean, like to put it like tangibly, like what if we're playing, we're sitting across from each other at a regional, we're playing a match for
Hmm.
30 minutes, right? Like
Hmm.
we are two connected individuals for 30 minutes, right? You are my
Yes.
competitor, you are my friend, like you're someone that has the same aspirations as me. I think that there's a
Mhm.
there's a level of like connection, not just like digital connection, but like
Yes.
tangible, like person to person connection there. That, regardless of us having totally different backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives, like in that moment, like we're on the same level, right? And I
Yeah,
think that's
man.
really, really cool. And I know this is straight up from your initial question about manhood, but I think that as like human to human, like there's a great level of equalization that gaming and esports kind of provides. And I think Pokemon
Mm.
VGC, in my experience, has been like a really like like awe-inspiring like look at that.
Yes, absolutely. I feel the same way about it. It's been one of the best things I've done for myself in terms of trying to find people who feel like my people and connect with them. And it's doing a great job at it, and I love the community. Yeah, and I think that this is oftentimes solution for a lot of us as guys in particular. But let's get to you as a guy, and just again, what was that experience? What has that experience of manhood been like for you?
Yeah, I think that like my viewpoint on manhood has like really changed. I think if you were to ask
Mhm.
me like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and even to now, like I'd probably give you a different answer. And I
Mhm.
think that's part of, just growing up and having worldly experiences and meeting others. But like I think that my previous perception of manhood was like definitely informed by the men in my life, but also just like the
Yeah.
men in media and the people that you saw all the time. Uh, I think of like, I feel like a lot of guys feel this way, but I think of like my dad, right? It's kind of like the pillar of manhood. And my
Yeah.
dad, despite being my dad, like is, like half a foot taller than me. He like
Mm.
body builds, like he's like this like huge like macho guy, and he's like the friendliest teacher in the world, right? But
Mm.
like the perception I think of manhood early on for me was like had these themes of like machismo and like
Yeah.
protection and providing, right? And self-sacrifice. And I
Yes.
think that like while I understand like where those like thoughts come from, like my view now is more about like and even like looking at the same idols, like more about like integrity and
Mm.
honesty and like
Hmm.
service and being a role model for others, right?
Yes.
And I get those same, you know, for like perspectives, like those same adjectives, for lack of a better word, from the same people in my life that, kind of fueled my initial perception of masculinity.
Yeah.
So I think that like, for me, it was a lot of like, how can I view the same models and icons in my life in like a different light? Uh,
Hmm.
and also like, in some ways, manhood just feels like to me a little like over-gendered sometimes, right? Like the same
Totally.
traits I told you, like integrity, honesty, being a role model. Like I'd apply that to my women and non-binary friends too. Like those principles, I think from manhood,
Hmm.
uh, like while they have the word man in it, right? Like these are humanity principles. And I think that
Absolutely.
like uh, while manhood like looks different for everyone, I think that the core of what it does is it inspires young men to live up to something like powerful and give them like purpose
Mm.
and like an ideology to follow.
Yes. Two things I love to touch on: the media piece, and it's almost like the media piece kind of tells you those big things: jacked, strong, courageous, don't take no shit, whatever. Like
Mhm.
those are like, oh, look how cool this figure is. Like I should at that, look at those things in my dad, and that's the important stuff. And like over time, whatever, redirected you to be like, well, my dad's more than those things. And those things that he is like are really important. And for me, like the classic masculinity stuff, I'm like, that stuff can be cool. It can be cool. It can be really valuable. It can be really responsible even at times, the taking care of what you got to take care of.
Mhm.
But when we've making ourselves only that, I think is when we lose, and when we see guys struggling the way that a lot of them do. And I love that you mentioned them as human qualities, and how much we add in the integrity, the honesty, and that's part of it. But how much, guys who are focused on that other stuff, that more obvious stuff, the stuff that may have been pushed at us since we were little boys in the media, how much are we missing in our humanity that are more traditionally feminine qualities that a lot of us may struggle with accessing or like engaging with, because, to be feminine ain't so cool in that vision of masculinity. And like just an invitation for us to like expand our manhood for more than manhood. It can be a piece of what we are, but we are humans, and there are so many things we can be. Totally.
Yeah, and like don't get me wrong, like I think that there are parts of like this like stereotypical and I'll call it like almost like archaic or traditional like view of manhood
Mm-hmm.
that like are still really positive. Like
Yeah.
I think that this idea of like old like 19 like 50s manhood where it's like oh like like raise a family, buy a house, like that's like aspirational stuff that gives you purpose. And that's like
Yeah.
really really cool to like put some of your, like aspirations on like providing for others, right? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
really cool. And that's, in some ways an act of service, right? But just
Absolutely.
because your vision of manhood or your definition of manhood doesn't include that, doesn't invalidate it. I think that's what's most important, right? I
Yes.
I think that I'm really grateful to live in like a day and age where like the definition of manhood is vague and is
Yes.
abstract, right? And like
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways that's like even more empowering than having like a very clear cut definition and like goals and check marks to like mark off, right?
Totally. Totally. Thinking about the kind of standard environment that we've come up in. I asked this question. I probably reframe this question as everyone's like, oh, yes, of course. Has there been times where you weren't living up to this standard of quote unquote real man that had you feel challenging feelings about yourself?
Well, Roy, yes, of course. No, I mean, like, I think that there are definitely times that, like, I think growing up, like, this idea of like masculinity and manhood kind of like carves a really like clear, for lack of a better word, path for like growing up, right? Like,
Mm,
a lot of boys grow up and they try out sports, right?
yeah.
Like there are certain like hobbies and interests that like parents start kind of feeding, a lot of their children, like that are really like you're related to manhood and like growing up with that structure. But I think as you mature and you kind of grow into your personality and have a level of comfort with like who you are, like there are things and interests that you find that don't align with that for like vision of manhood that you maybe grew up with, like like
Mhm.
embracing a game, like being a gamer, right? Like I played jazz band, so I call myself like like a half jazz kid or a half
Yeah.
a band kid, right? Like those aren't qualities that I think a lot of people traditionally like associate with manhood, but like
Yeah.
looking back now, like they're a part of my identity, they're a part of what's made me a man now. And I
Hmm.
think that like while maybe in the moment I didn't feel like I was living up to society's standards of manhood and like checking off those very rigid boxes, I think that in many ways, like my definition of manhood skewed to meet me where I'm at today and skewed to meet
Mm.
like, my personality and my interests. And there's a level of, I think, like self-love and confidence that comes with that.
Absolutely. It's skewed to allow you to be who you actually are and be like, oh yeah, that's a man. That's how I'm a man.
Yeah. And like,
And that's
I
how I'm
think
myself, you know?
yeah, and like a big part of that too is like, like I think mental health plays a really big role in that
Yeah.
too. Something along the lines of like, uh, I think back in like 2000, like early 2000s, about 9% of men like, sought mental health treatment, counseling, and like now if you're looking at like 2021, 2022, that number's increased like, 4% year over year, and we're up to like 17% now. Still,
Beautiful.
like lacking by some standards, but like I think that that's a really tangible example of how, just along the spectrum of mental health, this idea of manhood, this like stoic, like nothing
Hmm.
bothers me kind of view of manhood has shifted to like, now it's okay to have mental health issues. It's okay to, question yourself and suffer from things like anxiety and depression and self-doubt. Like,
Hmm.
uh, and I think that like just using that as a spectrum for our conversation kind of shows how this definition of manhood just over the past, 2 decades has exploded and expanded.
Absolutely. I think I'd love to add that it's okay, like it's now okay to ask for help. And not only is it okay to ask for help, I'm out here one of the guys begging guys, please get help. Please ask for
Yeah.
help. Please. And I feel like just the days we're in, it's like I think a lot of it has to do with guys trying to be whatever that old kind of man was, and there's a lot of power and there's a lot of domination. There's a lot of inability to lose in that old type of manhood, and I think it's creating a lot of the challenges we're seeing here. And like with the result of that being just guys were causing a lot of harm, and the reduction of that harm comes in us challenging ourselves to look at the ways that we're hurt, look at the ways that we're challenged,
Yeah.
and get some assistance around those ways. And totally okay to do that. Totally okay to admit that we have those things going on. Nick, can I ask you, I guess, kind of if you've had some mental health challenges at any point in your life that you kind of overcame or you deal with, and how you did those things or are currently dealing with them?
Yeah, this is actually like a really good time to ask me that question because
Mm.
I started for the first time therapy 4 months ago. And that was a
Nice.
really big like step in my life because
Mm.
I feel like especially over the past like 5, 10 years, like my uh relationship with mental health was very much like, for lack of a better word, like old school masculine. It was like
Hmm.
ignore, it was repress, it was, uh like self-sacrifice for the, betterment of others. And I think
Yeah.
that like going to therapy for the first time was really, really uncomfortable for me.
Hmm.
I sat down in that room, and again, I say that this is right now. I love my therapist now, but I sat down in that room and I fidgeted with myself, and it was like pulling teeth to like open up about like what I was struggling with. And
Mm-hmm.
like you would think that as a guy who, you know, does journalism and PR now, that like talking about myself like wouldn't be an issue, but it was. And I think that a lot of that was my relationship with like, growing up and masculinity and manhood, but more importantly, like my relationship with mental health. And
Yeah.
so over these like past 4 months in particular, like I think the biggest change for me and the biggest challenge I've overcome is like self-labeling. And I think that's an issue
Mm.
that a lot of men also have, like
Yeah.
being able to say that, I'm a man that experiences anxiety. I'm a man that,
Mm.
has been like had symptoms of depression or I feel sad sometimes.
Yeah.
Uh, More importantly, like I'm a man who has trauma.
Yes.
Like I think that a lot of uh you know, how men are portrayed in media or how mental health is portrayed in media, I should say, is through the lens of like, especially when it comes to things like sexual assault, like the female survivor, right? And it's difficult for men to have those role models in public sometimes.
Hmm.
And I think what I've learned a lot about in the past 4 months is like it's self-labeling as a way to like not only spot a problem, but identify and heal through a problem. And
Yeah.
like the first step is to like, call a spade, and
Yeah.
then you can start working through it. But you're not going to start working through it unless you like call something for what it is.
Yes, absolutely. It's the acceptance piece. I take it like a I take it a step further, right? And it's labeling what is happening with you, accepting that it's happening to you, and it's kind of like accepting yourself as somebody that it's happening to. Like there's like there it is only it is your thing. It is your thing to deal with, and to I think part of the solution is to love yourself through that and not judge yourself for going through what you're going through. And that piece is where it gets real hard. I think each piece can be very difficult, but that piece right there, continuing to love yourself through it, because a lot of us like would not necessarily say it, and some of us may be very clear on it, but like really dislike ourselves because of what we're dealing with. And just an invitation to like really challenge
Yeah.
yourself to move away from that when you see those thoughts come up.
And like I think that one thing I've definitely learned over these past 4 months in therapy is that like these issues like don't fix themselves, right? Like there
Mm-hmm.
are like it is literally like how your body like naturally heals. Like that's not necessarily how like your mind and heart heal, right? Like they're different beasts, but they also require tools and resources and
Yes.
support to get you to that place. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
that like in many ways, like I feel a lot more empowered, proud, and confident as a man, but also just as a person because I've come to terms with those things. And I feel like I have the tools now to start making progress and start like bettering myself in that way. And
Mm.
like I say as a man because like candidly as while it's gotten better, like mental health is still in some ways a gendered issue, right? Like
Totally.
and here's a stat for you, Roy. Like just like off the top of the dome, I can maybe send you a link to toss in the description if you want to like fact
Yeah.
check me here. But it's 40% of men reported mental health illness in 2022 and got their like care and services compared to 52% of women. So it's close
Mm-hmm.
to 50-50, right? But
Yeah.
there's still a gap and when you break it down by gender. And so I think that like what's really important to me and what has also helped motivate me to seek the help that I needed last year was like seeing other men open about those issues, right?
Mm.
Like, and we talked about masculinity, right? Like you need to have role models and
Yes.
like, folks to look up to. And that also includes like emotional maturity and like emotional masculinity, for lack of a better word, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you need to
Mm-hmm.
see that like, taking control of your mental health and like taking care of yourself, like is manly and is
Yeah.
masculine, right? It just may be a different way than you saw growing up.
Totally. It's like, and you can go to the media and it's like, wow, that's super badass dude that I respect. I don't know if you know anything about pro wrestling, but Dave Batista, he's
Mhm.
he played Drax in Guardians of the Galaxy, if
Yeah.
you're familiar with that. And he is like just this guy, super jacked, badass, but like the stuff he puts out on social media, like there's a softness about him as well, stuff about him taking care of his mental health as well. And it's like, wow, that super tough dude who I respect because of his dude toughness or whatever, he goes therapy. Wow.
Yeah.
Like I maybe I can do it. Like if he does it, then there's no excuse for me not to. Like that is totally like a thing that energizes guys to move forward, and for all of us to be that example for the guys who are closer to us as well. Like, and it's not just him because he's rich and he's got money to do it, but like regular dudes who you might respect are doing it too. And if we, I think that's what this podcast is really about, like having these conversations. And if your favorite, Pokemon YouTuber is talking about like that he went through it as well. Hey, it's normal for you too, and here's ways that you can get help. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm real inspired by that. Real inspired by that.
And like I think maybe the last thing like I'll say on the topic is like I think that a lot of this comes back to and is rooted to your point like masculinity, right? Like growing up, like one of the tenets of masculinity for me was like the handyman and like the I can fix it guy, right? Like you bring a problem. Again, I think of my dad, whether it be like like a broken faucet, right, or an issue you're having with a friend, right, and they have the advice or the tools or the skills to
Yeah.
fix it, like this pragmatist mentality. I
Mm-hmm.
think that like what I've discovered now is I'm also a pragmatist, right? But I'm
Yeah.
applying that same like I want to fix this. I want to be handy to like my mental and like to
Yes.
my lifestyle. And I think that that's still like that tenet of masculinity, right? But it's applied in
Mm-hmm.
a way that like I need, in a way that
Yes.
will make me a better person and a better friend and a better fiance. And so I think
Absolutely.
that like that's how you can take the old school, maybe deconstructive version of masculinity and make it constructive and inspiring.
Absolutely. I like you know, flat tire. You gotta fix the flat tire. You're the strong, tough dude who knows how to do it. And why do you really do it? Because maybe you want to make it easier for your wife who needs to drive the car to do whatever she's got to do tomorrow. And family needs the car, right? I think family needs a fully functioning, well, dad or husband
Yeah.
or whatever. And maybe there's something that, our version of the broken tire, like that's in the heart, in the mind, in that trauma. You're helping the people
Yeah.
around you by fixing that, by taking responsibility for that, just like you would fixing whatever you would be fixing around the house. And yeah, I love that, man. Very clear. Very
Yeah, for
clear.
sure. And like, and to your point, like with the work you do, right? Like creating space for others, right? Like
Mhm.
that's masculine, right? Like,
Totally.
people like maybe I didn't see that growing up, but like I think that what's beautiful about like our space and like, this community too is like
Mhm.
you see that now.
Yes, totally. Big time. Couple questions left and one bit, and I just love the topic of joy for us as people. Just especially these days, things are tough. How where are you finding your joy? And Pokemon's obviously brought me a lot of joy, and I'm wondering how it's contributed to your happiness as well.
Yeah, I mean, like I think for me, honestly, like the backbone of it is like I'd say nostalgia. And that sounds kind of
Mhm.
cheesy, but like I think
Mm.
that there's a level of like when you're playing like a Pokemon game, like if I'm playing like Emerald on my an emulator on my phone, right? Or I'm like,
Yeah.
competing in a GC and I'm using like a Gen 3 classic, right? Like
Yes.
I think that there's a level of like peace and joy that like seeing your like childhood like,
Mhm.
favorite Pokemon like brings to you nowadays. Like it doesn't leave you.
Yeah.
It's also like incredibly cool that like Pokemon's become like this generational thing now, right? Like
Mm.
the folks who grew up with Pokemon are now raising kids who are choosing their first starter.
Yeah.
Like, and that's happening with gaming in general, right? But especially Pokemon. And I think that that's so powerful. And I would say like the second half for me, what's cracked that wide open is like VGC and like being
Yeah.
able to like meet others who are creating content or they're competing or they're doing in-house draft leagues like with others. And
Mm.
that sense of like shared competition and passion has been like a real conduit for me to find others who like have that same shared experience. Like
Mm.
it's so cool being able to walk into a room at a regional and be like, man, there is literally probably over 1,000 or 2,000 people in this room, whether they're playing Go, TCG, or VGC, that have the same love for this media that I do. And that could
Mm.
be like the first thing you say to someone. You can ask someone, "What's your favorite starter?"
Yeah.
Who would be your partner Pokemon? Like, what was your first game? And they'd have an answer for you. And that's what's really cool about Pokemon for me is that like the ice has been broken, right? Like we can all be nerds with each other for a
Yeah.
day, right? Like, no one here is gonna be like, this like super macho, like, oh, I'm embarrassed to be here, right? Like we're all
Yeah.
here for a reason. And I think that like VGC is really special that way because like folks are like they wear their passion on their sleeve, right? And that's what really cool.
Mhm. Mm. And based on where you're coming from and how much you've like just claimed to like your nerdy glory or whatever, I feel like a lot of people can come to an event, come to a regional, and let their freak flag fly, so to
Yeah.
speak, and just be free. And a lot of times, we may not be experiencing that freedom in our day-to-day lives, and I hope that we are in some way or finding ways that we can. But when we're engaging with our community, getting out to our events and whatnot, just freedom is something that I really feel just vibrating in those rooms, and it's a special thing.
Yeah, and like I think the other part of that too, Roy, is like for me personally, like Pokemon has given me an opportunity to like be a competitor, which has kind of been
Yes.
important to me. Like I
Hmm.
grew up playing sports. I did when I was doing jazz band, we did the competitions. I wasn't
Yeah.
particularly good at either of those things,
Mm.
but in college I started, pursuing esports. I
Mm.
was part of our esports program in college. I played like amateur Hearthstone for a while, and when that game died out, I'm like, man, I miss competing. I miss like taking gaming, which is something I love, and like being really good and competitive at it. Like that's
Yeah.
just like another layer of like investment I can pour into that. And so
Mhm.
when VGC rolled around, I started like consuming content online, like, watching like your old Wolfie videos, right? And
Yeah.
like, going to your first regional and playing in house draft leagues. Like that for me was this like aha moment where I'm like, damn, I can take something I'm passionate about and pour even more of myself into it. I can, pour like my competitive energy into it too, right? Because like
Mhm.
some people might not be built this way, but for me, like when I like can like really, really like invest myself in something, I get more out of it. Like the more I
Yeah.
pour in, the more I pour out. And like
Totally.
VGC is just one of those like bottomless wells that like it feels like
Mm.
you like no one out there can master it.
Yeah.
So like it's like a bottomless well of things like pour your heart and soul into, and then in
Yes.
return you just get so much out of it too.
Absolutely. I love that you said like you can't master it. Like there are so many aspects. There's always some aspect of your game you can be working on. And just I get just unreal, just fire energy, just lining up across from somebody and just like your wit versus mine, let's go. And just there's also something very creative about it. You can have a play style you can play with Tropius on in the
Yeah.
GC and just see what happens, and it can work out really well just based on time and who you're across and how much you've put into knowing that team, knowing that piece, and whatnot, and super dope, super
Yeah,
dope.
and
Mm-hmm.
like Pokemon VGC, I think like this is gonna be my nerdy esports talk track of the podcast, right? But like there's open and closed esports ecosystems, and the beauty of the open ecosystem that VGC is that like literally I could be Joe Schmo. I could never have been to an esports event, but if I'm good enough and I have the prep and the mental, I can show up to a regional, I can day two, and I can
Oh
take
yeah.
home first place and qualify for Worlds.
Hell
That's
yeah.
so stinking cool. I One of my favorite VGC memories is I have a group of guys that I go to regionals with. And I think it was like the first match of the day. My buddy, I think this was like his first or second regional, still pretty new to the scene, matched up against Aaron Trailer. And
Mm.
like, that's a name you see like on your your Arcanine, and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
like time to take my O2 and like pack it up, right? He took a game off of him.
Hell
And he came
yeah.
back, he's like, I lost a set, but like I took a game off of Aaron Trailer. And I'm like, that is like one of those moments that like makes you think like it makes you feel like invincible almost for like
Hell
the rest of the
yeah.
regional. It doesn't matter like what your score is like after those 9 games at the time. Like those are the moments that are empowering and like make you think like, man, I can scrap with the best. And I
Hell
think that's what
yeah.
the beauty of like VGC is right now, is that like I could be sitting across from some like first timer, and then I could be sitting across from like a former world champ, right?
Hell yeah.
And you still have the same like you get the same like amount of like joy and pride
Mhm.
after every win, after every loss, like at least for me. So that's what
Absolutely.
makes it really special.
It's so special. And I feel you there, dude. I feel you there. Like you can have a chance in every game to pull something out. And yeah, yeah. I'm just going over it. I'm just like, yeah, I've been across and played like some really great players and made some good moves and had been completely steamrolled. And I played against day one people, and it's been real competitive, just all the entire range has happened in such a short time. It's super fun. I love the game so much.
I tell people like my most impactful game of or my most impactful set of VGC was a loss. Like my
Yeah.
first ever regional I went to, my first game, I sat down And I'm looking at my opponent and we're making small talk. She's really nice. And I look over at her Switch case. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And it was from Yokohama. I
Mm,
think it was from Yokohama or wherever
yeah.
Worlds was that year. I'm like, oh, did you go to Worlds? And she's like, yeah, like I was at Worlds. And I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, first game, someone who's been to Worlds. I'm like, not a good matchup for me. I got absolutely dumpstered. I was playing Reggie Drago Psy Spam for my
Yeah.
first region. So like no like head off. I just got
Yep.
rolled my first. I got 2-0'd. And afterwards, I reconnected with her. I'm like, how can I get involved in VGC? And she was from the area too, so connected me with good games. And
Yeah.
through there, I've met like other players from the area. I've invested in VGC. I've been coached by professionals. Like,
Yeah.
and it was all because I got dumpstered. I was grateful, and I was like, how can I like continue to invest in this? How can I like not
Yes.
give up? How can I pour more of myself into this? And the VGC community is so special because almost every person I've met doesn't respond with like, nah, like I'm gonna gatekeep this from you. It's
Yeah.
like, heck yeah,
Come on
like
in.
here, like yeah, come on in.
Yeah. Especially good games, folks. Love the good games, folks. Been
Yeah,
so
huge shout out to those guys.
yeah, it's been so good, so inviting, and just great models of what I think the community is overall, and definitely can't be at its best.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
big time.
Last question of the evening, my friend, and just ask you to imagine guys out there struggling and need of some words of encouragement, and you've got the opportunity to give them to them. What might you say?
Man, tough question, Roy.
Yeah.
Way to drop a bombshell on me at the very
Oh
end.
yeah. Let's go.
I I think that like my piece of advice or like what I would tell them is like at the end of the day, it's all about purpose, right?
Mm,
I think that like struggle and pursuing purpose aren't mutually exclusive. Like I
mm,
can have a long day at work and be exhausted and still like close my laptop at the end of the day and be like, man, I love what I do. Like, man, I got a lot out of today. I did some awesome work today. And like, even though I'm tired, like I might be physically and mentally tired, I might be like maximally fulfilled
oh yeah.
and passionate, right? And that's what like, brings me to bed and wakes me up the next day for me.
Mm,
And so I think that like whether it be like work or relationships or passion projects, like life is draining, right? You
yeah.
expend energy to make it through the day, and some days are easier and harder than others, right? But that doesn't mean that like every day can't be fulfilling. And so I think
Mm,
that my like advice or like the push that I would give to whoever is struggling is like find that sense of purpose and tie your actions and your motivations to the pursuit of that like purpose, right? Like it may be small. It might be like, I want to be a better friend. Like that's my purpose right now, right? Like how can I be a better friend? Maybe I'm like tying like, oh, I want to like, you know, like clean up my house, right? So I can host people and I can like,
mm,
throw like parties and host game nights. Or maybe I want to like, work out so I feel more energized. I can, feel like I can spend more time with people, right? Like I think that there's small ways you can ladder up like the mundane and the
yeah.
essentials to like the sense of purpose that makes even like the little things feel like you're working towards something bigger than yourself. And so
Mm.
I know it's a little like philosophical and like lofty, but like that's what I would say.
Dude, I think the most important thing that we can do is have a sense of purpose. And I truly believe a disconnection from purpose is one of the greatest drivers of people's misery, suffering, can be even, a word
Yeah.
I'd even use for it. And, more so in the emotional realm of things, often the mental health realm of things, even without some additional brain chemistry, whatever thing contributing, like purpose is certainly your medicine. Like how are you spending this life if it's just in pursuit of the material that may not be as inspiring as being in pursuit of something that makes you feel alive. And I think that's more than philosophical. I think that's
Yeah.
something I often just, when I'm just moving through the world, just a connection to my purpose at most times. And when I feel disconnected from it is when I feel low. And
Yeah.
I think, it's something I would give as advice to in some way, shape, or form. Like, absolutely find
And
that
like
purpose and exercise it.
in some ways, like purpose for me and like the connection to purpose, like yeah, like it ebbs and flows at times. Like we all have long days, and you're like, what am I doing? Right? Like what am I
Yes.
doing with my life?
Mhm.
But it's never gone. It's
Mhm.
got like the Mario star invincibility, right? Like
Yes.
it flickers, it might be dim, it might be bright, but it's there. Like I think back to when I was doing journalism before the pandemic, and this was, you know, during a tough time to be a journalist. It was the start of like a lot of the fake news you know, push happening out,
Mm.
protests, and I remember like covering events where there were armed protesters, which
Mm.
was new for me. I remember going covering events where people were like, "You are like a liar," and like insulting my character and like my work and my career. But my passion and purpose, especially at the time and even still now, is like telling stories and like, you
Mhm.
know, uh, and so I think that like even though I'm like met with like that level of adversity and that pushback, like I was still able to like lay my head down on my pillow that night and be like, yeah, it was a long day. Like I got a lot of pushback, but like the goalpost hasn't changed, you
Hell
know,
yeah.
like uh and so I think that's what makes it like so special, right? Like that's what makes it such a motivator. Is like once you have those, you know, pillars that you can keep working towards every day, like doesn't matter what the world throws at you, right? Like they're not going anywhere.
Yes, fantastic. Nick, thank you so much, dude. Attached to that purpose, guys. If you feel distance from it, I'd say that it's often not too far from, what you've created just throughout your life. What skills have you built throughout your life? What have you found that you're good at throughout your life? And if you, don't feel like you have answered those questions, then even just finding the answers to those questions is a bit purposeful, playing
I
around with
totally
them.
agree.
Yes, fantastic. Nick, this has been a very nourishing conversation. I'm really glad that we got to do it. I wish no, this happened when it should have happened, but
Yeah.
you're definitely someone I want to talk to more. I will say that for sure. And love your perspective, love the love that you got for the game, and thanks for coming on and sharing tonight.
Of course, please. Thank you for having me and looking forward to seeing what you cook up in the episodes after me and well beyond.
Hey, my guy, more to come, guys, more to come. And if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you give it a like, subscribe, or share with someone who you think might get something from the podcast, from the message. My goal is to get this in front of every guy who could possibly need it so they can not only feel better, but do better and be better for the world.